I hope you all are having a wonderful day. My name is Yupari, and I'd like to invite you into a different kind of portrait drawing and painting video. So this is going to be the start of a painting that I'm going to work on for a very long time. So this is going to be a transfer drawing or just a preliminary sketch. So I have the panel. This might be the panel I'm going to use, I don't know. But this is the size of the panel that I want to use. And this is 11 by 14. This is 12 by 12, or approximately 12 by 12. This is actually a store-bought MDF board that I had cut up into 12 by 12 pieces, and I gessoed it with Liquitex acrylic, just 2 layers, and then I combined Liquitex acrylic gesso with burnt umber acrylic paint to tone it. But we'll get into that when we get into the painting video. So this is going to be the transfer drawing, and what I did was you see these lines here, hopefully you can see them. I just have kind of a boundary just to make sure that I don't pass these lines. So I'm going to be working with graphite, and if you want to know exactly what materials that I'll be using, you can go ahead and scroll down the description box below, and I'll have all of that information typed up for you. But I can tell you, of course, that this is just a regular graphite pencil. This is, in fact, my favorite pencil. It's 0.7 millimeter lead. It is a B, so it's just a regular B pencil, I believe it is. So I'm starting off with a simple envelope, and I'm drawing kind of lightly. So when you're working with graphite, you actually want to make very light marks. See that? Super light. So we have a basic outside shape. This is kind of the distance that I want. Something like this, and then something like this. So I'm just thinking of the negative shape. I don't know, maybe we can grow this a little bit. Just pushing this out a little further. Who knows? But the reason that I'm creating this transfer drawing, and the reason I'm going to be working in this type of process and filming in this type of way, is so that you can get the real me, like how I prefer to work. For those of you that have been watching my channel for a very long time, you know that I like to try different techniques out all the time. You know that I like to create videos and content on different techniques, and I make tutorials about them all the time. But I want to get you a little more of a front row seat into how I actually like to work. So I'm going to be showing you the process that I use in my own work, my own studio work. Nothing's going to change in terms of how I produce the video, how I narrate the video. It's just that you're going to have a little more of me. So right now I'm just working with simple straight lines and angles. Simple straight lines and angles. So I'm just thinking of the size of the face right now. So again, this is going to be a transfer drawing, so let's get the actual panel. Yeah, I think that's about the size that I want to work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the shape of the hair. So this is actually going to come down over this way. This goes straight out. And the reason I like to work in this way, that is to do a very, not overly careful, but kind of careful preparatory drawing, is just that, you know, if you've watched my videos, you know how much I emphasize drawing. Drawing is the root of all good and evil in painting, I think. So really, having these preliminary drawings really just gives your work, in my opinion, such a big advantage. All right, so what we just put in is the little shape here for the eye socket. So this is the angle of the eyes. This is the angle of the eyebrow, angle of the eye here, angle of the eyebrow. Now these are going to be rough approximations, and I'm making these approximations just by eye. So here we have the bottom of the nose. And of course the little accent mark here for the eye socket. Now if you've watched my videos before, you know that this is pretty much standard how I like to start my drawings. And when I'm working with paint, when I'm painting directly, this is very similar to how I work. But graphite just kind of gives you a little more control over your mark making. So now we're going to very carefully look at the shape of the tear duct using the eyebrows. So here's a little shape for the eyebrow. I'm thinking of the angle of the eyebrows. Check this out. So it's somewhat like this, right? Now I know you're looking at this on your screen and you know exactly what angle it is because it's right on your screen. But for me, I like to work side by side. I mean, I'm looking at a TV screen as my photo reference. So the TV screen is off camera, but it's to the side over there. I actually don't like to look at a printed out photograph, for those of you that are wondering. So let's take a look at the shape of the eye socket before we put in any kind of little details. This comes out right down here. There we have the bottom of the eye socket. Concavity of the eye socket right here, paving way for the tear duct. Let's put in a little angle here. Now, one thing I like to look at is the distance from one tear duct to the other. So here is one tear duct. I don't know, what are we going to title this video? What are we going to title this video, everyone? I think we're going to title it how to deal with proportions. So let's talk about proportion now. And proportion is going to be basically down to simple shape and how you relate shapes to one another. So dealing with this point right here to this point. What is the distance between these 2 points? What is the angle that these 2 points are making in relation to one another? Now, this tear duct, a little bit higher up, so it's at an angle. This distance here, don't know if I have it quite yet, but optically, this is how large that distance looks in relation to the bottom of the chin and the top of the hairline. And we're going to want each feature to be composed of just a few simple straight lines and angles. So here we have a little corner of the side of the wing of the nose on one side. Let's move over here. Wing of the nose on the other side. And another little important thing I should remark on is the way that I'm moving the pencil. See how I'm kind of moving about in this kind of way? And I'm holding the pencil back here. And I'm pretty much at arm's length away. Pretty much keeping myself an arm's length away from the paper. Very much how I work when I'm painting. Keeping a good distance away from the paper also kind of helps out with objectivity. You don't hyper focus on any little shape too early. So what I just did was I noticed that the side of the tear duct actually comes out and creates an angle somewhat like that. So I'm pushing that shape in. Now I'm walking my way up here and I see that the forehead is actually, the angle is a little more straight than I had in the initial pass. So I'm just going to move that up. And as I'm moving that shape up, I realized that the hairline, distance from the hairline to the eyebrows, it could be too large. Not entirely sure yet. We really want to keep things simple and easy to understand. And again, those of you that have been watching me and listening to me for a while know what I'm going to say. I'd like to keep my shape simple and easy to understand, and you can fill in the rest. And for those of you that don't know what I'm going to say, I keep my shapes simple and easy for me to understand so that when the time comes to make any changes, those changes are simple and easy to manage. Talk about changes, right? So this eye is enormous. So let's take our little caliper here. Enormous. This eye is 25.8 millimeters. This eye is 16.4. Enormous mistake. And that's what it takes. I mean, it takes that kind of objective eye to work out the proportions. So what I did was move that forward, or sorry, I pulled this out a little bit. Here's the tear duct. Now this eye, going to push this back over here. Not really trying to make anything perfect just yet, but the length of the eyes, we want to work that out. So 22.9 millimeters, 17.2 millimeters. And I know that these numbers might be bugging some of you out. But again, this is kind of how I work in the studio. Like, this is my process. This is just me. So again, this eye is a little too big, so I'm going to push it over. And about that will be fine. Angle of the eyebrows. Now this stage is referred to as the block-in stage. And you may have heard me talk about the block-in stage as very back and forthy. Excuse my loose use of English here, but it's very, very back and forth. So that angle I noticed needed to come out. See how I'm relating this angle to this angle? And again, we might be in a little bit of trouble with the distance between the eyebrows to the hairline. Now, let's see. I don't know. I think that it's fine for now, but of course, keeping the shape simple and easy so that when the time comes, as you know, to make the changes, they will be simple and easy to manage. So shape coming out here. And I'm making my marks a little bit darker now. The more confident I become with my marks, the darker I will make them. And in the beginning, I know that in the beginning of this drawing, I did have the exposure a little bit too high on my camera. So hopefully in my editor, I'll be able to contrast it a little bit so you could see those loose lines. Angle comes out. Can't really see too much there, so I'm not going to do too much yet. So let's go ahead and start to block in the light and shadow shapes. Right about there. I don't know. This shape still feels a little bit fugitive to me. Still feels a little on edge. Maybe it could be that this distance here is too large. I don't know. Just push this back in a little bit. Now let's take a look at the tear duct to the corner of the nose, just dropping a vertical. Here's the tear duct. Dropping a vertical here, just optically. The nose is right about here, the wing of the nose. Now we're starting to draw in the the angle of the cast shadow. This angle right here is pretty, it's a pretty telltale sign of the direction of the light. Cast shadow. So a combination of these two angles, this one going out here, this one going out here, probably is telling us that the light is at about this angle. Let's go ahead and just take note of that angle. The light is coming at this type of angle. And I like to keep track of information like that in the block-in. Remember, the block-in is all about gathering information. In fact, the start of a painting is all about gathering information. I actually almost never jump into a painting without having any kind of preliminary studies. So now we've just put in the nostril here and over here, just using a single line. Let's walk our way down. Just going to walk all the way down here to a relationship that I use in terms of likeness and proportion. So right here, let's put a point here. So the root of the nose, I walk my way down to the top of the upper lip. They must communicate with one another. And by communicate, I mean right here is the root of the nose, here's the mouth. Imagine we're dropping a line, a vertical right here. See that? And that is the distance of the philtrum. The philtrum is that little teardrop shaped looking thing that we all have. Some are more evident than others, but a little teardrop looking shape that connects the root of the nose to the top of the upper lip. So one point here for the corner of the side of the mouth. And again, I know many of you have been wondering how I work out proportions, because I do have a lot of cut scenes in my painting videos where I'll spend a while focusing on the proportion and then switch back into filming, and then the proportion's already figured out. But again, I'm not trying to hide anything. It's just that this process takes a while, very back and forth-ish. So now the corner of the mouth is here, corner of the nose is there. Dropping a vertical from the corner of the nose, we see that the mouth is just a little bit to the right. See this? Dropping a vertical, we see that the corner of the mouth is just a little bit to the right. Put in the bottom of the mouth. The bottom of the mouth must also relate to the top of the mouth. The bottom middle of the mouth must relate to the top middle of the mouth. So this comes down about here. And the backside of the other, I can't even talk. The back of the mouth on the other side is over here. So now we can relate these 2 points and get an angle. So this point here, so this must create an angle. And this angle must communicate with the angle of the nose and the angle of the eyes. So now I think that the angle is just right. And the bottom of the mouth must communicate with the bottom of the chin. So I usually relate the shape of the philtrum. I usually relate this distance to the bottom of the nose in relation to the chin. And what I'm noting is that this has to be a little bit smaller than this distance, which it is, but I think that this might still be able to come down. And that's okay. That's what the transfer drawing or the preliminary drawing is for. Now we're kind of getting closer to having the proportions established. And again, I like to do this by eye. I don't really like to break out a ruler that much to measure, although, I mean, of course, I'll do things like this, like relate these shapes to one another with my caliper. But I really like to take in visual information and interpret. I don't like the copy idea. I don't like to think of myself as a photocopier. Okay, so I think that's about it for the proportion. And let's go ahead and continue to block in the light and shadow shapes. We want simple shapes of light and shadow. This angle is even more severe. Now I'm starting to notice that that angle comes out a little bit more, meaning the angle is more sharp angle. Now we're going to start to put in, let's go ahead and be very light with this mark, the zygomatic bone, and how the zygomatic bone, the cheekbone, relates to the cast shadow that we're seeing here. So this cast shadow is being very instructive, very informative, telling us that the side plane of the cheek, the zygomatic region, is there. And that's also the boundary of the cast shadow. This comes right out here, down, over, and then goes out this way. Very simple there. And again, I know that this filming process is going to be a little bit more, it's going to have much more of me talking, much more of me going back and forth, much more of what goes on in my mind as I actually work. As I actually work in terms of my own studio work. In the tutorials, I list everything out for you. I tell you every step of the process. I guide you through the steps of the process, but these are the intermittent phases that you don't always get to see in the portrait painting tutorials, just because I have to fit in one entire portrait in one video. So instead, we're going to split this up so you can get much more information, and hopefully that will help you out. Just let me know. Promise you I'll check the comments section for this video. Okay, so now we blocked in the cast shadow for the mouth, and now we're running into some issues. So I feel like after blocking in that shape, the mouth might be too far down. Now I'm going to sit back and observe whether it's too far down or not. And yes, in fact, it is a little. Now if I relate the nostril here to this upper lip, wow. Yeah. So two things I could do. One thing I could do is move the chin down, or I could move the mouth up. Now I'm going to make that decision based on the other information that I have. And I usually like to look at the structure that encompasses the mouth. And just looking at this shape here, this little contours here, I see that I feel that this, maybe the best course of action would be move that up. So remember I said that this is a very back and forthy kind of thing. So let's go ahead and draw some verticals here, and let me go ahead and show you how I do that. So what I'm going to do is, with the kneaded eraser, just slightly subtract till I only see a little ghost, little remnant, I can't even speak, little bits of information here. So again, what is not wrong, at least I don't think it is just yet, is the relations, the vertical relations. So let's go ahead, See this vertical relation here? I'm going to move this up. So here was the point where the upper lip was before. Now we're moving it up. There's the point where the corner of the mouth was before. Moving it up. This point here, I'm going to move it up. And then the bottom, of course, going to move it up. And is that enough? I don't know. Now this is the real life stuff. I'm giving you the real life Yupari, dealing with proportions. One of the hardest things with drawing in general, especially when it comes to portrait. And this is how Yupari struggles with it, and this is how Yupari deals with it. I know it's kind of strange. I'm talking as if I'm like third person or something, but bear with me here. So I'm moving the mouth up. Now remember, keep your shape simple and easy to work with. Perfect example here. When the time comes to make changes, those changes are going to be simple and easy to manage. Alright, so here's the little cast shadow for the bottom of the lip. Now it's looking a little closer. And this is all about training your observation skills, in my opinion. A lot of observation goes into this. So that bottom shape right there is actually just a cast shadow. Here's the lower lip right here. All about training your observation skills. That should be enough just to move the mouth up a little bit. Next thing I want to do is put in a little shape here for the iris. Don't want to do too much because, of course, this is my first attempt at getting her proportions. And this is really what makes alla prima painting so darn difficult. So if you don't know what alla prima painting is, it's just basically creating a portrait painting in one sitting. See, I just ended up taking that out. So alla prima portrait painting, I think, in my opinion, is the most difficult type of painting possible. I mean, it's a lot of fun, but it's extremely demanding. It's extremely difficult, just because look how difficult it is for me to work out these proportions. I've done thousands of portraits. I've drawn and painted hundreds and hundreds of portraits. I've made hundreds and hundreds of portrait paintings. And I still struggle with the same things that we all struggle with. But let's take something that's difficult and let's make it fun, and let's make it interesting. So here's the bottom of the lower eyelid. I personally like the challenge involved in working out proportion by eye. I know portrait tends to go through an awkward stage. This might be the awkward stage. It's always, I find in my opinion, it's almost always once the iris starts to come in that we reach the awkward stage. And the awkward stage, it's just a stage. It's just a stage we'll work out. All right, so let's go ahead and start to block in the shadows. Very lightly now. Don't want to do too much yet. Actually, just block that in. Just a simple little wash of value there. Darker shape down here for the lower eyelid. There we go. And I like to make my I like to shade in this direction diagonally because I'm right-handed, and it's a little easier to shade this way than to have to turn my hand the other direction. And I think just in terms of aesthetic, it just looks a little more clean to shade in diagonals as opposed to verticals and horizontals. Doesn't mean I won't use them. Just means I like to shade in diagonal directions. Diagonal patterns. Let's go ahead and shade this in here. And I try to, especially with graphite, keep my arm pretty steady. But of course, nothing ever goes perfectly. I try to avoid things like that. Little random dark lines that weren't meant to be there. But it's okay. Again, the angle of the jaw. And then while we're doing this, let's go ahead and look at this little shape here for her chin. This is very characteristic of her chin, this little shape here. Very elegant little shape there. So instead of perfectly tracing out the cast shadow shape in one line, I actually like to draw it out in little hatches like this. And right about this stage, I'm thinking of basically revisiting the outside shape. So here I'm starting to notice I can add a little bit more specificity. So this is one advantage to working in graphite that you don't really have with charcoal, is to use a ghost. So I just erased the side of the contour. And this is really the power of working with contours. Just simple little lines. We're following the zygomatic bone, how this comes out. And then another thing I'm noticing is that this comes out and then in like that. So here's the side of the mouth. And then that angle goes out like this. This angle comes down. And another thing, especially with a 3/4 view, that I like to look for is the distance between here and here, here and here, here and here. So the corner of each feature with the side of the outside shape. And I think we're good. But we'll see. And this video is going to be uploaded before the underpainting. So go ahead and leave a comment if you think that anything is a little bit fishy or a little bit off with the contours. Now don't trace or try to superimpose the photograph onto the drawing because that kind of isn't what I like to do. I like to observe visual information, interpret, and create paintings out of it. Let's go ahead and think about lately, these days, my favorite painter is Caravaggio. Go ahead and look at a Caravaggio for a second. Just look at it. Look at a Caravaggio. And you'll see that there isn't really a perfect photographic rendition of the model, though there were rumors that he would use certain mechanical things to help him get his proportions. But if he used mechanical devices, shadows or something to get his proportions, it wasn't to copy them down. It was probably just to assist with his design, with his compositions. And that's different than taking, say, an image and perfectly tracing it onto your canvas. Very different thing. Now again, I'm going to drop a vertical from the corner of the eyebrow to the side of the eye. See that there's a little angle here for the eyebrow. It goes out like that. So I kind of see how I kind of like to work all around. And I usually kind of get really quiet when I'm in deep focus. So kind of when I get into a zone or something. So there will be certain times where I won't really talk as much. You just get to watch me all you'd like. So again, as I make my marks darker, they become more and more confident. Not necessarily because they're correct, just because I think they're correct. Little angle here. We're seeing a little bit of light there for the sclera, just a little bit. Now the drawing's starting to get a little closer, I think. Just go ahead and put in this dark shape here. And again, this shape here is giving me issues. Just the corner of the eye to the back of the hair. Still, I don't really know why, but I'll figure it out. And again, it's important to work out these issues. I think it's important to work out these issues in the transfer drawing or in the preliminary drawing. It just makes your painting that much stronger, in my opinion. Now we're putting in the corner of the iris. We're seeing a tiny sliver here of the sclera, a tiny sliver here of the sclera. So make sure that each side of the face relates to one another. And of course we have the upper eyelid making a shape over here. The bottom eyelid. The dark shape over here. And now that I think that I have the proportions a little bit closer, I mean, there are some things that I want to keep changing, such as this shape here. This is actually more straight. And this angle doesn't actually exist. It's a little bit more flat here. And then see, this just doesn't exist. This needs to go. Just gonna fill in that little shape. I don't know. I can't really get that to go. But anyway, the next thing that I want to do is I take my kneaded eraser, kind of roll it. Try not to put too much. I'm trying not to put too much of the grease from my hands or anything. and go up and down the picture, and not erase it completely, of course, but just ghost it. See that? And the reason I'm doing this is just to give myself another layer in the drawing of accuracy and control. And so remember, this is really about gathering information. So now we're going to go ahead and make these shapes even more precise. And one of the reasons I like to use mechanical pencil as opposed to a regular pencil that you have to sharpen is that I don't like spending too much time sharpening pencils, to be honest. I don't know. Go ahead, comment down below if you feel the same way. You don't feel like sharpening pencils and you'd rather just use a mechanical pencil. I'd like to know if anyone else out there has the same kind of laziness with pencils as I do. So this shape comes out like this, a little more than I had before. This comes out. Let's go ahead and solidify this shape here. There's a little cast shadow on the lip. It's a little darker there. This angle comes up. I'm having a hard time seeing where the boundary of light and shadow is on her mouth, but I think it's over here. Not entirely sure. Okay, now this shape, see, now the game is all about specificity. What we're after is specificity. There's an angle like this, and this comes in like this. Whereas before it was just one uniform line. Now we're subdividing our lines, adding more specificity to them. In my past, one of my teachers that really showed me the power of a strong linear construction was this artist by the name John DeMartin. He also has a book out called Classical Figure Atelier, and I think he still teaches in New York. But John DeMartin is his name. He really, like what you're seeing here with the mouth, is he really drove that into us. So now let's go ahead, take a look at this cast shadow. Again, we're revisiting each and every shape, making sure they are as accurate as they can be, though we want them to remain simplistic in nature. The root of the nose, I didn't know this before, but it actually comes down a little more. A couple weeks ago, I made a portrait painting video. I think I titled it "Make It Realistic" or something, I forget, where I painted the same model, but I didn't use a preliminary drawing. So I had a little bit of some troubles with the proportions. I think someone told me I had the nose turned the wrong way or something like that. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that can happen. And it might even happen with the transfer drawing. It's okay. Don't get frustrated at what other people say. Don't get frustrated if things don't turn out the way you want them to in your drawing or your painting. It's all a building process. Okay, so now I'm starting to notice that there's a little more specificity to the nose. So here's the corner of the side of the wing of the nose. So that's the corner of the wing of the nose. this shape, the shape actually comes up. It's the side of the cast shadow of the wing of the nose. This actually comes up a little bit, down. And I think this was the problem that I had in my portrait painting video of her. This part right here. So this is the bottom of the bulb of the nose. I'm just drawing out the boundary of the cast shadow. This point right here, this is the lowest point on the curve, I believe. This has to relate to the center line. The center line is like this, right? It also has to relate to the rest of the features. So basically, let's just make sure this point relates to the top middle of the mouth, and it relates somewhere to the eyes. Let's just use a vertical for that. Basically, it should relate to this corner here of the tear duct. And by relate, I mean dropping a vertical right here should land here, should land here. Imagine these are skyscrapers. I'm dropping a watermelon, splat, lands right here. Drop a watermelon, splat, lands here. Drop a watermelon, splat, lands over here. Okay, so just very carefully following the shapes for the nose. Here's the contour for the wing of the nose. And let's go ahead and just put in a little halftone. So our first little attempt at a halftone for the nose. Let's use this little halftone as a building block to solidify our placement of the nose. Somewhat like that. And let's go ahead and put this shadow shape back in. Something's up with the mouth. I think now that I put this value, I should probably put this value here. A little halftone. And as I put that in, I should make this shape a little darker. There we go. And now we're going to revisit the cast shadow for the chin. And I know that these videos are going to be a little bit longer, and not longer in the length of each individual video, but I'm going to be giving you much more videos splitting up the process, so you can actually, for those that are interested, you can see much more into my thought process, much more into how I actually work. The real life kind of stuff involved in drawing and painting. There's an angle here for the chin. This angle actually comes out a little bit like this. And there's a little angle change here for the mouth. All right, so to revisit the eyes, let's go ahead and take a look at the shape of the eyes. I think her eyes are a little more almond, I think, a little more round than I had before. So let's make it a little more round. And by make it more round, I mean I'm just raising kind of the top of the peak of convexity. And this is kind of how I wrestle with proportion and with drawing. Keyword wrestle. I mean, it really is a task, but I enjoy it. And I encourage you to do this. Take your time with these simple shapes. So I ghosted out the drawing, right? At least that's what I'm going to call it. I ghosted it out with the Kneaded Eraser, and that basically liberated me to make these little subtle changes, making the eyes a little bit more round, putting that little extra bit of specificity into the nose and into the mouth. And I think that I've worked out the problem with this shape here. I like to think of this as like theoretical physics. Think about a physicist thinking and thinking and thinking about a problem, writing out blocks of equations in their head before finally coming up with a simple and elegant solution. Kind of the same kind of thing. We're really thinking our way through this. A lot of this is deductive. A lot of this is inductive. It's all a balance. Still think that this could raise a little bit. I think her eyes are a little bigger. Raising that means I should probably raise this eyebrow a little bit. Not much. A little bit. Now, something I'm about to tell you is extremely important, at least if you want to create classical type portrait paintings, classical realistic paintings, and drawings. You don't have to get everything exactly like the model. What? That's true. You don't have to make everything look exactly perfect like the model, but what you do need to do is understand the fundamental concepts to developing form, to depicting light, depicting emotion, depicting anatomical structure. And don't worry, we're going to go over everything. My goal is to bring the studio to you. We can learn together. Go ahead, comment down on your favorite approach to painting. Do you like to use a classical approach? Do you like to use an alla prima approach? What are your thoughts? Now let's look at the other eye. Let's see, I think before I do anything, I'm going to look at these measurements. This eye is roughly 24.4 millimeters. This one is an astounding 17.4 millimeters. There's still something up with the eyes. And who knows how long this video is going to be and how long it's going to take me to get the eyes to work with one another. But again, this is the real life stuff. I think it is. It's just that I need to increase this a little bit more. But I also need to understand that the model is in 3/4. So what I'm seeing is an exaggeration. So she's in 3/4. So I'm seeing much less of this side of her face. But still, I need to increase this shape. So let's see if that'll do. Don't want them to be exact, but this eye has to be a little bit bigger. I don't want them to be the same exact. So let's push this corner out a little bit here. And this is really for those of you that have been wanting to see how I do this, how I work with proportion. Remember, drawing is the root of all good and evil in painting. So moving that shape out to there, now I want to make sure that this distance is okay. Typically, the length of an eye is the distance between the eyes, typically, if the model is facing you, but the model is in 3/4, so it's going to be a little different. And I'm not going to pretend like I know everything here. If you have any tips on how I could improve on my proportions, on my blocking in, let me know. I know many artists light years better than me, and they take quite a bit of time with their block ins. The block in is somewhat of a meditative process. It takes a lot of time, quite a bit of time. So we've pushed that shape out a little bit. I think that's a little better. So here's the shadow shape for the side of the eye. Bottom of the eyelid. Corner of the iris here. We're seeing a little bit of the sclera here and a little bit of the sclera here. So we gotta make sure to keep relating these two shapes to one another. Remember, we have bilateral symmetry, so we really have to consider both sides of the face, especially when creating the block in. Shade that in again. Looks a little better, I hope. I made the iris too big. Now let's go ahead and put in this shape here. So I think what we had before was all right. It's just that there's another angle here that I didn't have before I ghosted the drawing. Let's see. Let's go ahead and put in a value here now for the eye socket. simple little dark light there for the back of the eye socket. And again, let's look at this shape here. This contour will come out a little bit. And the eyebrow, I didn't notice this before, actually wraps around and meets the corner of the side of the face. There we go. Now this shape here, this has to come down a little more. And then straight over here. And while we're doing that, let's go ahead and put in this little shape here for the hair. And over here. So I think that that's going to be it for this segment of this video. We're going to call this one, I don't know, something about proportion. How to find and how to establish proportion. And now we're going to move on to another layer of this drawing. So a lot of this is actually going to be kind of improv, really. Just me drawing and painting and taking you along the journey. So the next thing that I'm going to film is going to be the shading. So basically tips, techniques, and ideas on how I shade a drawing.